Hello and welcome. I'm Forgo. This is ForgoTV. I'm going to do something a little different. I've got a CNC machine. You can kind of see it up there on the screen. I built that, and I've got to make some furniture. So I'm going to do kind of like a primer video for some other videos that I'll do maybe for other projects that I do using Blender. But basically what I use is Blender 3D. Is an open source software. It's free. It's very in-depth. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a guru with it. I've been using it 10 years. I still have to look stuff up. But it's very powerful. You can model things, characters, movies, animations, whatever you want to do, pretty much you can do it. So let's go ahead and jump in. The overview of the video is basically I've got to make furniture with this machine, but I've got to plan out like where it's going to fit, how big it's got to be for the containers that I've got, that kind of thing. And I use Blender 3D to visualize all these things. So this video is just to give you an idea in case you're following along later and you're like, I don't really know what the heck he's doing. This looks weird to me. You can look back on this and it'll give you an idea basically on how to just kind of like how the software works generally. It's not a big tutorial by any means. So we'll just jump in now into Blender. So we've got Blender 3D, you download it. You've got File, Asset, or Edit, Render, Window, Help are the main menus. Here I've got a bunch of different windows for different workflows, basically. So there's shading, there's animation, rendering, geometry nodes, scripting, modeling, sculpting, UV editing. There's just all kinds of things you can do. We're only going to mess with the modeling part of it, or laying out the objects. And I'll kind of give you an idea, just to give an idea of where we're at here. We've got 5 different windows. But each window in the left corner has the same options. So you can set all of these are the same window, basically. So with these 5 different windows, this just happens to be my setup. You might see a different setup online. You might have yours originally set up differently. I forget how it is set up, but it can be changed. So if, for example, you want to have your 3D viewport stuck looking at it from that angle and you're making a character and you want to see the face or whatever it is, then you can do it. You can make all these different windows, whatever you want to have them be. This is kind of my setup now. The main windows that we're concerned about is there's Asset Browser. Up here's like your scene collection. So the file is basically a scene. There's a camera, there's light. So if you're looking at the camera, you press 0, and this is what the cameraman sees in our scene. We aren't rendering anything, we're not drawing anything, or we're not making a movie, so it's not really important. But up here is where you find all your objects. So for right now, we've got our cube, a light, and a camera. So that's what this window does up here. This is down here is all the properties. So we've got, the different format of the scene. We've got the units, which we should stop here first. Depending on where you're at, you might be metric and you might be imperial. I'm in the US, we use imperial system. But if you use metric, make sure you're set to metric. That way, all of your things that as you go forward, when you design them, they're to scale. They fit within each other. Because otherwise, if you start one file and you don't have this set right, it's going to import wrong. It's going to look weird. So make sure your units are right. I like to go with inches and degrees. It's really all I care about now. But this is also the other properties. So there's some world properties. There's some collection properties. There's the camera. There's some of this stuff is like force fields and wind and things like that. There's object constraints. So like, what this object might react when another object moves, that kind of thing. We're not dealing with that too much. We might do let's say we want to do like a material, just a basic material. You can get into this and make it reflective. You can make it metallic. You can do all kinds of things. But if we just want to make this like a wood colored box, we can do that. So we change the base color, but you see nothing changed. Up here, there's wireframe, there's shading, and then there's materials and textures, and then there's lighting and materials and textures. So you'll see shadows and you'll see all kinds of other things. If we add a plane, which is just like a piece of paper, it's like a floor. So if we do that, then you can see all of a sudden now we've got shadows on our floor for a cube that's halfway up, halfway on our floor. So let's say, so we've got our cube, we've got it colored. Over here is how we manipulate it, our object. So cursor we're not going to mess with too much, but basically the cursor is where everything, if you add an object, it's going to be added at the cursor. The cursor can be moved around, so you can move the orientation of the box. So if we go here to move, you can see that this is in the center of the box. You've got all these things. So if you move it, it's moving it from the center. If you rotate it, which is R and Z, you rotate it around the Z-axis. If you rotate it around the X-axis, or you can rotate it around the Y-axis. And all of these, so move is G, so the G key is move. So if we want to move it on the Y-axis, we can go G, Y, and then we can say 20, and it'll move it 20 inches over. And we hit return. So we just moved it over 20 inches just by using the keyboard. You could do it over here, and if we go to item up here, this is going to show, you can see that the Y is moving over here as we move it on the Y. If we move it on the Z or on the X, it's going to move that X number up and down. Or we could just set it and say, I want it to be 12 inches over there, and I want that to be 12 inches over there. And now we've got, because this is a 24 by 24 by 24 inch cube, and we know that because of our, once we select it and hit the item, it shows the dimensions here, 24 by 24 by 24. Now we moved over 12 by 12 because our center, because this is in the center, it's basically lining it up with this center point here. It's kind of up to you how you want to have things centered. As you animate things, like if we make this a door, then we're going to want to make, we're going to want to make this a pivot point. For example, if we go to object mode and we take there's points, lines, and planes. So we can select a plane, we could select a line, we can select a point. So let's say we want this point to be our pivot point. We want to swing it open, whatever. Then we can take that point, select it, and you have to go into edit mode to move the cursor around like this. But then you pick your point, snap your vertices, cursor to selected. Now the cursor is over here. So if we go back to object mode, our cursor's in the corner. If we add a new box, it's going to put this center point right where the cursor was. So we moved the cursor, but now everything's going to be built there, basically. Which you can, or, it doesn't have to be. But before we do anything, we've got our cursor moved over, but we're still in the center over here. All we've got to do is we click on the cursor, we right-click, set origin to 3D cursor, and now, if we want to rotate on the X, we can flip it around like that. So it's kind of handy if you're making doors, that kind of thing. Or if you're just wanting to rotate, around, for example, like a 2x4. If you have it on a corner, it's easier to move around the world and connect it to things, basically. So speaking of that, so we've got our box, we colored it, we've got all this stuff. Over here, this is all full. But when you start, it's going to be nothing. There's nothing in here. So let's assume that we've got nothing here. Before we do anything with asset browser stuff, before you want to make your new whatevers, to be used. And the whole point of using Asset Browser is you put it in there, you use it whatever files you want later on. So it's like a make once, reuse it forever kind of thing. So it's great for things like this. Like if you're making walls, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do 2x4s and you do sheets of plywood or drywall, and you can build it all that way and get super technical. As long as your dimensions are all right, you're pretty much going to be good. But it doesn't have to be 100% technical. It could be just a wall. So let's say we go with a 4.5-inch wall, because we've got 3.5-inch plywood or 2x4, plus a 1/2 inch on each side for the drywall. So that would make it a 4.5-inch wall, right? So we've got 4.5-inch wall thickness, 120 to make it 10 feet wide. We'll go 96 to make it 8 feet tall. So now we got a wall, 10-foot wall, 8 feet tall. We can, like most other software, there's Control C, Control V, Control Z. So Control C, copy, Control V, paste. So we could do that. We could do Control C, Control V. Now we copy, paste. Now we've got the second one here. And we can do a G, which is our grab. And then we go on the X, and we say 120. So now we've got 10 feet that it moved it out. So we've got this wall that moved out 10 feet. Now, if you don't want it on that side of it, you go with negative number. So if we Control Z, undoes what we just did. It's the undo key, basically. Control Z. So now if we want to go the other way, we can G, grab it, X for which way we want it to move. And now we can go negative 120, and it'll put this wall over here. Now you can select both of these walls. There's a duplicate shortcut, which is basically Shift D, duplicates it, which is Control C, Control V in one key, basically. So Shift Z, now we have this copy. Now all we need to do is rotate it on the Z axis by 180, or rotate on the Z axis 90. And because our cursor is all messed up, you can see that, you know, for when you're first starting out, messing with the cursor can really kind of goof things up for you. So I don't really recommend messing with the cursor too much. I just wanted to show you so you could see as the cursor moves around in my projects, that's what's going on. It doesn't have to be, though. And if, you know, like that, where the cursor's not in the center here, if we rotate it around, it's going to rotate both these objects around that point, not the center of this. If we want it to go to the center of this, we're going to need to make it to where we have the we can move the cursor. For example, we can move the cursor here. And now we could, or we move the cursor here, and now we could rotate Z 90. No, wait a minute. Oh yeah, no, that's not even going to work either. Because basically we copied all of them with the orientation on the corner. Anyway. It's not that important. You can see that, you know, like I don't have them 100%. If you want to get them 100%, you can get into 7. You can shift middle button to drag it. And then you can kind of move it and say, okay, now that's perfect. And now that's perfect. Or maybe you don't want those put into each other. So now we put that wall against that wall, and that's perfect. So you can manipulate it around and move things around and get it just right if things are off like that. So yeah, and doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect unless you're really doing it for things like I'm doing, like, you know, you're actually making furniture with it. Then you want some accuracy, making sure that each corner butts up perfect, that kind of thing. But we basically made 4 walls. So we've got like a little room. And then you can, you know, add a door later, or maybe you don't want to have, maybe this is, let's see, 60 inches minus 24, 36. So if we do a 36 inches over here and 36 inches over here, we've got a doorway. And then you can put a header over here, rotate Y 90. You know, it does, and like I say, it's not like you actually have to pass a building inspection. So we can scale Y, and we can do this 24 or something. Oops. Scale X 24. Nope, that wasn't it. Scale Z 24. Why did that do that? Anyway. Do that. 24. There we go. Got 24 inch tall, and let's see, this is actually 48. And then you can scooch it over, boom, 48 inch door or so. So you've got a little room there. Now, we haven't added an asset browser, we haven't done anything, but we've got a general idea of like a little shed room here, for example. Then we can add in, I'll just show you kind of an example of how you could do it. So for example, I've got some machines here. I modeled my compressor just for fun. You don't have to model the compressor though. I don't know if I actually, you'll see it in the other file. Yeah, you'll see it in the other file. But I've basically got, this is modeled, but it's, if we look at the item, I mean, it basically it's made to scale, and when you drag it in, you know it's to scale. So we know it would fit here in this spot. But it doesn't have to be that. If you know that this is going to be, if you know, for example, you've got a, I don't know, a planer or something. So let's say it's 48 inches tall, and let's say 36 inches wide, and it sits on your floor, or maybe it's on a cart, and it sits up a little bit. That's all it has to be, as long as it's just the footprint of the item. So you know, okay, if I move it over here, do I have room? If I move it over here, do I have room? Could I move my compressor over there? Could it fit over here with something else over here? You know, so that's the main point of using this asset browser, is to be able to move things around and see if it fits, basically. So we've got a general idea of this wall. We've got a general idea of this wall, but we haven't used anything in the asset browser. So the first thing you want to do is you want to save your file. So let's save this as, I'm just going to save it as something that I know that is going to save as. So now we could save it, because the asset browser won't work until you save the file first. Because otherwise you can mess with it all you want and it'd be frustrating of like, why doesn't it work? It has to be saved first. So let's say, for example, we've got this wall here. Let's change this up. Let's say this is a 4.5 inch wall, but this is actually, we're going to make this a 2x4. So we're going to make it 3.5 by 1.5 by 96. So now we've got a 2x4. Because a 2x4 is not actually 2x4, it's actually 3.5 by 1.5. But this is a 2x4. And if we rename it here, we can go 2x4. That way we know what it is. And so here we've got our 2x4, we've got the color. We can make it a red 2x4. We can make it a green 2x4. These are all using the same material. So if we want like a different material here, we can just add a new material here. We can take that one off, and then we can make this one that, whatever. So if you see that moving around, it's just because we copied and pasted some of these objects. But so we've got this, 2x4, and we've got a brown 2x4. So how we make it an asset is you right click it, mark as asset. And over here in unassigned, you'll see it pop up. Now, if you save your file, you can take this, you can add a new folder. Let's say we make it test2. So we've got a new folder down here. We take our unassigned, we move it into test2 or whatever our folder is going to be. I just don't want to make more folders. So we've got our old 2x4 test that we made, or that I made in another try. But this is our 2x4 that we just made. And we can drag it out, and now we've got our 2x4 again. It's off a little bit, and we got to drag it down on the floor. But as you can see, it kept the point that we made for our orientation. If we made this just like a regular 2x4, so let's say we made this a 2x4 of 3.5 by 1.5 by 96. So let's say we've got our second 2x4. This is where it's in the center, because remember we changed the orientation to be the point at the bottom, so it's a little easier to line up to the floor, that kind of thing. But this one's in the center. So let's say we add this as, it's going to keep all of the information that is the main point. We mark as an asset. This is our cube. So it's now, instead of 2x4, it's named cube. We put that in our test. So now if we drag out the cube, it's keeping that center orientation. Whereas if we drag out our 2x4, it keeps the color, the texture, the orientation of it keeps everything. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that if you're making things, make sure you have it, the orientation where you want it. You have you have everything set. You have all the materials, whatever. And then that way you don't have to keep messing with it. Unless you want it to where you're not sure what kind of wood you want it and you just want a blank wood. That's fine. Because the cool thing is you can also add materials in here as you make them, which is a whole different thing. But let's say we want this to be a wood material that I've got. And you can kind of see it. It looks more like wood. It'd be a little easier to see it on this. Looks more like wood. And that's just a material I made with the different settings to make it look like a burled wood. And for example, if we want to make this like a sheet, then we can do a 4x8 sheet, right? And then we set this to be our 4x8. So 4 is 48 by 96 by ½ inch plywood. So now we've got 4x8 by 0.5. So we can mark as asset. We can move from our unassigned. We take this, we move this into our test folder. We go into the test folder, we drag this out. We get another 2x4 or another sheet. So that's the main point is, once you make one thing, you can just keep using it over and over again. So we've got a bunch of these, and we duplicate it, and we grab it, and we go Y, 16. Now we've got 16 inches on center, and we can just keep doing that, or we can make an array, which is the little wrench down here. We can make an array. We can go 16. Oh, not that way. Actually, I want to go half on that because of the way the array is. But then you've got 16 inches on center. So then you've got your 2x4 is going to fit on there. Boom, just like that. And then, put your other plywood on there, and you can start building walls. And then once you've got all this, then you can actually, if you want to go the depth of it, where did I put my? I don't know. I don't want to waste too much time though. Or get conduit in there somewhere. So you can put conduit in there, wire, or whatever it is that you want to put in there. You can take one out. So you shift this and we grab it. Grab Y16. The thing about the arrays is when you grab it, you're going to grab the whole array, which is fine if it's going to be like a static wall. But if you really want to have it to where you've got individual 2x4s that you can take in and out, like add a window or whatever, then you'll have to do them like copy them and make them in a row. And there's probably another way to do that, but that's how I do it anyway. So you get the idea. We can make walls. We can make like basic walls, which is just like a block like these. Or you can go with 2x4s and skin it with drywall looking stuff or plywood or whatever. And you've got an idea of what everything looks like. And so I'm going to leave it with that because that's the general idea. That's why we're using it. We want to get just to familiarize yourself on how does he use this asset browser in case you wanted to start doing it on your own. Because I think it's neat. So yeah, there it is. We got walls, 2x4s and stuff. The next video, we're going to go into kind of how to fit whatever we've got going into wherever we want it to go, and then making sure we like the look of it, that kind of thing. And then from there, I'll do a video on making it, and then we'll do a video on like maybe putting it together. I don't know. We'll do stuff in a series. But that's the general overview, and I hope you have a good day. And thanks for watching. I'm going to turn this off and talk to you later.